I'm not quite sure what we're going to talk about today. There's lots of things floating around and they don't seem to be tied up. The phrase that comes is safety, security, and predictability, but I'm not quite sure how that ties in with things. The subject that was brought up was that just a little time ago we had a phase happen. Diane woke up and we had people staying here and around, and they all had an experience. They got less attached, in fact not attached at all, to their relationship. They were all much more alive, much more present, much more fun. Although in themselves they might not be having that much fun because they were going through things. Their relationship had broken up. And all these things were happening, but it was very alive and very juicy and very in the moment, not knowing. Now there's two things about that, if I can remember. Often I remember the one and forget the other. One is, there does seem to be phases. If you read the news, preferably a good, reputable alternative news source, you'll get there are phases, things go by. Some days there are more stabbings and shootings and suicides and more wars breaking out. There seems to be phases of things. It's said in the time of Buddha, more people had an awakening than has ever happened before. And then we could say that was because Buddha was on the planet, but maybe Buddha being on the planet was part of the phase. Now when we talk about phases, I often find this interesting, that astrologers say astronomy has absolutely no value whatsoever. And then I say, well look, at full moon, all the oceans on the planet rise several meters. It's not just that we get a high tide here, we get a high tide all over the world. The full moon pulls up the ocean on the planet. It affects this vast amount of water, and we are 90% water. So are we not affected? Absolutely. And that's just the moon, which is comparatively passive little person. And we have flares happening on the sun that often affects our communications and our electronic thing. All this is happening in the universe. And there are phases. So maybe these phases affect us. We go through phases when things become more easy and less easy. And the game is to be fully available when things are flowing in our way. So let's say this recent phase was part of something bigger. Diane had her awakening. The people around were all being affected. And they were more alive, they were shining. They were wonderful. Some of them were going through things uncomfortably, but more alive, less automatic. And some of them were going through things in a very delightful way. They were clearer and more at peace in themselves, a phase. And then it started to drop out. Diane lost it, and then this person went back into their relationship and back into their relationship, and this one, and everything went to be calmer, duller, more dead. The phase was over. Now, as Diane went out of that phase, everything changed. Now, was that a phase, or was it something? But this is what happens. Let's see if you can follow this. As I often say, we have all these different levels of consciousness, of awakeness. Now, when a comparatively sleepy person, I say comparatively, not a very, very sleepy person, has an awakening, they're not really aware that they're having an awakening. What they're aware of is things are different, but they don't realize they've reached another level of frequency, of consciousness. They don't really realize that. And they're seeing things differently. Now, when they lose it again, what they don't realize is that they've been there. They forget. Vaguely an idea, but it's gone. Now they're back being automatic again. One of the components of slipping back is this. Innately, we are born with a mechanism to keep us safe, secure, and predictable. And so, when we become more alive and more awake, we can't be sure of anything. We never can be sure of anything, but we think we can. But when we become more alive, we start to say, no, nothing is safe, secure, and predictable. And now I'm living on the edge, and there's fun to that, but also, I don't know what's going to happen. How do I know I'm going to be able to produce enough money to support myself, the mortgage, the children, and they don't know, but they're choosing to go back. They're choosing to drop out of this finer frequency into a lower frequency where they feel more safe, secure, and predictable. They're not. Nobody ever is. Nothing changes on that level except the illusion of it. So without knowing it, they choose to go back. This is separate from if somebody has a complete awakening and there's something they haven't yet finished, they need to go back to finish. This is different. This is sort of more mundane. On some level, we choose to go back. Another part to that phenomenon is what we'll call life without an interface. Now, everybody that isn't in the state, the zone, has an interface. So let's talk about an interface. The brain cannot process each moment. It can't do that. It can't take in everything it sees, everything it hears, everything it touches. It can't take in all that. So what it does is it takes in little bits. In fact, it's a bit like a movie film. A movie film is actually little stills run past at a speed that makes it look like movement. And that's the way the brain works. Little bits. And then he puts it together inside. So that's the way life is. Life is little bits. And then the brain processes it and says this is reality. Now this processing could be called behavior, character, personality. It's fixed. When you meet somebody, unless they've had a tragedy or something wonderful happened, you pretty well know how they're going to be, what they're going to say, and how they're going to say it. How they dress. It's a foregone conclusion. And you're the same. Unless you're in the zone, you have a behavior. I just remember Zen says, when you're alone, be as though you're with your most honored guest. And when you're with your most honored guest, be as though alone. In other words, you're always in the state. And you're not in the state. What you're in is your automatic behavior. Even when you're alone, You're in your automatic state. That isn't what Zen means. You're in your automatic state, but it's an alone automatic state. Then you go to meet somebody and you're with an authoritative automatic state. Or somebody you don't have any respect for and in your superior automatic state. But you see, wherever you go, you're not you. You are not your unformed, flowing response to this moment. Because it's not safe. When you take your state of automatic behavior, it's pretty predictable. You know how you're going to be, what you're going to do, what you're going to say, and you know the results from that, and your behavioral mechanism, your survival mechanism is very happy about that. We know how we're going to, but it's not alive, it's not real, and you don't feel wonderful. So most people, most of the time, are taking their behavior, which they modify slightly wherever they go, according to the circumstances. Now, somebody in the state doesn't do that. You see, when they're in the state, they don't have a state. They're totally malleable all the time, in each moment, not knowing. And then they meet someone, and the state automatically adjusts to be with that person, because they're not self-centered and thus in a stuck state. They include all the time. Include. Sometimes you see people walking down the street, and a delightful little baby with a smile on its face is smiling, walks past. They don't see it. They're in their state. They're in their mind. And then you see people who are a little bit more awake, and they see the baby. And some see the baby and respond. But it's still in the state rather than just being here now. Responding to this person, this state. Always fluid, always flowing inside. Now, if you meet somebody like that, you can't actually pin them down. Who is this person? You can't see. But not only can you not pin them down, they can't pin themselves down. If you say, "Who are you?" they don't know. They know something about themselves in this moment in response to your question. But it's more to do with you than them. Because in a way, and it's hard to explain, in a way they're totally empty and yet so full of everything. Everything. Because there's nothing in the way of them and everything. They are everything. But it's not formed. It's unformed. Now, if a person is in their behavior, you see, there's somebody there, but it's a very small, tiny, little bit of presence. Very small. It's enclosed. Of course, the vastness is there, but they're not operating from there. They're operating from their safe, secure, predictable place, or so they think. So you don't meet this vastness. When you meet this vastness, something else is happening. Now, you can be in that state anytime you like, because it's there. Now, it's always there. How do you get there? You can't. You can't get there. Jesus says, ask and it will be given unto you. No, don't ask. Because if you ask from the old. It won't be given to you because you've already got it. Seek and you will find. You don't have to seek. It's already there. Thou art that. The kingdom of God is within. You are that vastness. So, how do you contact that vastness? Disconnect from your smallness. from your predictability, your safety and security, what you think is knowing. You don't know. It's only an illusion. Disconnect from it. Don't know in each moment. Imagine you've come from another planet. Plonk. Here you are. You know nothing about this place. You'd be as a little child, wouldn't you? What's that? What's that sound? What's that smell? What's that shape? What's that expression on this person's face? Do you see that? Present, here, now, not knowing. Now, when there's an expression on this person's face, how do you know what's going on? Well, you don't know, but you do have a response. If it's a smile, something smiles. If it's a frown, something goes on caution. It's there all the time. It's you that's not there all the time because you're doing your behavior and not being your vastness that's there all the time. So, how to drop into that? How many times do we say it? When it becomes your priority. When that is more important than the very life you think you're living. You'd rather die than leave that space. Choiceless. Unconditional. Here, now, just as it is.